Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Juan Reed with the Community REIT. Um, Thankful another Sunday to come on here and communicate with you guys. We have a special guest, a good friend, and a little brother of mine by the name of L.R. Wheaton. Um, Today, we're going to step back, and even though we are going to have some intellectual and some soulful conversation and things in the diagnosis of our communication is going to be within a professional vein. So we have someone today on that is a superintendent of construction. Now, when I was coming up in the construction and project management vein, the superintendent was different. The superintendent pretty much was the project manager. And the name project manager really wasn't popular until the late 90s. Okay? At one time, in one junction, I don't know if you know this, LR, but the project manager was responsible and was paid 2% of the project. And I'll tell you why. The project manager knew all the suppliers, he knew all the subcontractors, he had the relationship with the different communities that actually do the work. In other words, everything that the project manager now is responsible for on paper, he was really responsible for it in real life. And because the actual companies, ExxonMobil, the larger contractors like Bechtel that we know, didn't have those direct connections in the specific areas, they would hire a project manager. And his name was passed on throughout the organizations. Personally, the first real project manager I met was a guy named Gregory Tunsil. Look him up. We actually worked for a company called Shaw Group, right? At the time, it was a joint venture called IT Davy. And what we did is we did remediation work, essentially cleaning sites up, right? And I asked Greg one day, who's actually from Penn State, and we're still friends today. He actually grew one of the most successful remediation companies, not only in the United States, but in the world. And Greg was as arrogant as they could be, with a really good guy. I could call him today and he'd stick up for him. But I asked the guy, he was full of confidence, stuck his chest out everywhere he went, and he was brash, okay? And in the South, they didn't like that. But Greg and I got along well. I was a young guy, probably 20, something like that, 20, 21. And I said, well, what do you do? And I thought he was going to say, well, I'm an engineer, blah, blah, blah. And he did have an engineering degree. But he said, I'm a project manager. And I said, well, I want to be that. Because I saw his authority, but I saw all the mechanisms involved in what he did. And in all honesty, LR, it's a lot like what you do today. But they began to name it project manager, right? Probably for some financial purposes. So in any event, that was my beginning in project management. Well, today as a development community, community REIT, I invite different people on that I know that are beneficial in the characterization of a really successful development company. If you don't have a good contractor, and if the contractor doesn't have good superintendents, then your projects are not going to be successful. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so it is rare in the black community or in the construction community in general to have a Afro-American superintendent, specifically for the large companies that Mr. Wheaton has worked for. And I found that to be very unique. And we developed, like I said, a big brother, little brother relationship. And I've been very impressed with the young man since I've known him. He's introduced me to probably some people that are not as genuine as he is. But that is not rare in the black construction community, right? But he is a genuine guy, and I appreciate him coming on and talking to our community about what a superintendent is, what they do, and what they are responsible for. And so the first thing I'm going to do, LR, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, who you work for, and then after that, I'm going to ask you, what is a project superintendent, and how did you choose to be one?
All right, appreciate the one. I'll go ahead and get started. My name is L.R. Wheaton, born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. College educated at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, graduated in 2005. Been working in general building, commercial construction for about the last 20 years. Currently, I work for a company by the name of Robbins and Morton, based out of Birmingham, Alabama. Been around for be 70 years next year, so we'll be celebrating 70 years as a company. But we primarily build and construct healthcare facilities, new hospitals, medical office buildings, ambulatory surgery centers, freestanding emergency departments, anything that has to do with healthcare construction, we do. Been around project superintendent probably for around 10, 12 years out of those 20 years. And really, the reason why I enjoyed being out in the field as a project superintendent from the field operations side of things is because that's really where all the magic happens. You got a lot of things that happen behind the scenes, but the superintendents are really the people that are orchestrating those things out in the field. What I can compare it to is a CEO. And when I say CEO, most people think of Chief Executive Officer, but in this case, I switch out the E and I change that E to Chief Execution Officer.
Mm,
So execution is a verb. So we're really all about action. So that's what I would compare a superintendent to.
that sounds like something an ex-football player would say. I like that. I like that. We all about the action. So, do me a favor. Tell us what are some of the most important lessons you've learned in your profession.
That's a great question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is relationships. I mean, the construction industry, we really call it the AEC, architectural engineering construction industry, is really built on relationships. And by that I mean that there's this thing that I was referred to a long time ago. A gentleman told me about deposits, relationship deposits and relationship withdrawals. You can't withdraw anything from something that which you did not deposit. So you
Mm,
have to make relationship deposits, and those things are going to come back full circle eventually. You're going to need somebody, or you're going to work with an individual. So typically, we try not to soil any relationships as you're building. You have to kind of work through things, and you really have to be a chameleon and be able to assimilate to all your environments because you're going to deal with different people. A lot of times, people from all over the world, especially where I work at. I work in South Florida now, so we deal with people from Central America, South America, people from the Caribbean islands, and all in between. So it's been a great learning experience. But I would definitely say relationship building.
okay, that's a good answer. That's a good answer. So that rolls into our next question. Unless you have any questions, Solomon, in that, because Solomon is one of the actually the board members for our community REIT. So
Okay.
Solomon, you have any questions within the questions? Go ahead and ask. I know you.
Oh, I, see, I'm trying to learn, man, because I don't know too much about construction and development.
Okay,
But
so this is a learning opportunity for you. That's
yep,
why we have them on, right?
yep.
So we hope that our community is listening too. So I'm going to go to the next question. Who, in particular, was the most significant influence in your life that pushed you to succeed in your role?
That's a fairly easy question for me. I would say it was my grandfather.
Mm,
He was R.T. Wheaton. First name was Robert, middle name was Thomas, but he went by his first two initials. But he was a junior. My great grandfather was a senior. My dad was the third. And my brother was the fourth. So Robert Thomas was kind of a family name. But reason why I say my grandfather is because he's the one who first got me involved in construction. I was about 12 years old. I remember it was summertime. I was going into sixth grade. He said, "Hey, you want to come to work?" I said, "Yeah." I had no idea what I was getting myself into, but
yeah, me either.
I
Yeah,
always knew I had an affinity for construction, So I went to
yeah.
work, and we would do fire restoration jobs on small businesses at home. So I
Okay.
learned everything from flat work concrete all the way up to painting and finishing and turning projects over. But one thing about him was he was a guy who wake up before the sun comes up, and we would go home at dark. So he really taught me the value of hard work. And I was reading a book. Actually, I'm still reading it, but it's called The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni, and in there it talks about these three virtues, and they were really humble, hungry, and smart. He says these are the three things that makes a great team player. And really construction is all about team.
Okay.
We can't get things done without people around us. And I always equated team as really the acronym team for together everyone accomplishes more. So you got to really be a team player in this industry in order to get things done. You can't be selfish. You can't be arrogant, because people don't want to work for you and they don't want to do things for you. But it was definitely my grandfather who I would say had the most influence on my construction career.
And your grandfather was a civil contractor?
Oh, he was basically a residential contractor who did light commercial work in
Okay.
St. Louis, Missouri. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Now you told me that you had a relationship with the airport when you were in St. Louis.
I grew up by the airport. So I
Okay.
would always sit outside and watch airplanes land. And I always had some curiosities about the airport. Just growing up that close to the airport, I could literally ride a bicycle over to where the airplanes used to land there at
Wow.
Lambert International. So
Okay. Okay. Number four. How can other uh, young blacks achieve success in the high level construction?
it's a great question, Juan. I think the best way I would approach that is there's a thing that everybody talks about, knowledge is power, but I disagree with the statement. Applied knowledge is where the power comes in, and that's where you get the wisdom at. And then
Very
that's
true.
going to allow you to get understanding. But before you even get there, as especially as a young man and a young black man in America, you really have to have knowledge of oneself.
Yes.
If you don't have knowledge of oneself, you'll never be able to really get the knowledge that's truly going to be essential to your success in this industry.
That's
So
true.
knowing who you are, knowing where you come from, scientifically speaking, the fact that we have this amount of melanin in our skins, it makes us genetically different. But it also kind of gives us an advantage in the way that we process information. If you really apply yourself, they used to say, saying that the everything you can reach for the stars, but in all honesty, man, you can have the universe and everything that's within it.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly right. Don't limit yourself. We
Yep.
talk a lot about that as it relates to religion. We believe that religion limits us.
Hmm.
It isolates us. So you're exactly right. Um, I rely on the power of God and the power of the Holy Spirit in everything that I do, um, for my understanding, for my direction, but more importantly, for the power to do something, right? I ran into an old superintendent when I was probably in my early 30s, and we were doing salvage construction,
Hmm.
okay? And he told me, he said, I started asking about degrees. That's the kind of stuff you talk about when you're young. What school did you go to and all that crap, right? He says, I didn't go to college. I'm like, really? Same kind of story you and I both had, but it was my father that took me out to the construction site. And he said, all I do is, he said, one, I look at the blueprints. I've done this before. I look at my experience. But he said, before I go out, I say a prayer and ask the Holy Spirit to I'm like, what? That's what I'm thinking. But I got to be frank with y'all. With all the understanding experience I have, I do the same thing.
Hmm.
Okay? I am a man that believes and loves God and want access to all his power and not just the limits that, uh, for the lack of a better term, other people's beliefs
Hmm.
uh, limit us to, right? And let's get into this a little bit. We could say a lot of things, right? I hear people, I think, very to not very uh, genuine people talking about separating all the unreligious and uh, ethically damaging information from certain religions. And I don't believe that is possible. Uh, and for this reason, it is so deeply ingrained to us that if we don't directly walk away from it, then we'll keep reaching for little pieces of it to make it fit ourselves. and then we'll
Yes.
never really separate ourselves, right? And in that word separation, I don't mean in any way, uh, because when you say things like that, people begin to believe that you're taking the ideology of the people that enslaved you or colonized you.
Hmm.
That's not the concept at all. I don't even have time to think that like that, LR or Solomon. But what I think is that if we don't isolate our cultural comprehension of each other, how I see you, how you see me, um, because let's be honest, there's a lot of negative connotations to how we think about each other. And that
Yes.
comes from, specifically from religion. A lot of it's not true. And so, but I see you that way because I've been taught to see you that way.
Hmm.
Because we've been placed in conditions. That religion and that entire process to manifest destiny isolated us in worlds separate from each other. And so I have to see you a certain way in order to move forward. And we're
Hmm.
going to get into that too because we need to talk about uh, the workplace. And that's going to be a funny conversation because LR know how I am when it comes to that. And I got some funny stories. But do you have anything to add to that, LR or Solomon, about how religion affects the relationships between our people professionally?
Oh yeah, I definitely would agree with the majority of what you're stating there. I mean, even if you look at the root word of religion, it means to tie back to something. So there's a lot of things that have been, passed down and taught, but uh, there's an old saying that you have to see it to believe it. It's actually the other way around. You got to believe it to see it, and you have to be in the mindset of reprogramming your mental state and what you've
That's
been
right.
taught to unlearn, relearn, and learn things over again. But it takes discipline at the end of the day. And unfortunately, a lot of people lack discipline in many areas of their lives. So when you're talking about that, you have to be a very disciplined person to even go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's an operative term, rabbit hole. Go ahead, Solomon.
But yeah, I was just getting ready to add that in today's day and age, you can't even talk about religion like that because people we've been taught to look at religion as God. So when you talk about separating yourself from religion, it's like, oh wait a minute, what are you doing? You're walking away
Hmm.
from God.
Yep.
So
Yeah. That,
people, it's hard for people to comprehend.
yeah.
When you say, "Oh, I'm not religious," or "I'm not looking at those practices." So
Well, in the grand scheme of things, you know, I I firmly believe that religion is man-made, but God gave us laws to live by.
That's right.
Those laws to live by, it's either right or wrong. There is no in between.
That's exactly right, brother. That's why me and you fit. That's it. All I believe is right and wrong. I don't see nothing else. And I'm gonna tell you something, Ella. I don't even know how to see anything else.
Hmm.
And people think it's because of my age. No, I thought like this when I was 12. And I tried myself personally to bend myself to certain things to fit in. It doesn't work for me, right? So the best thing that could have the word best word that could have been invented for me was entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
That's best word because corporate America I was very successful, but at some point I would have rubbed the wrong people wrong. So I had to take advantage of my skill and get out of it when I had the opportunity. All right, let me move on to the next question. Uh, now this is a good one. What or who are your greatest environmental resources for success? Because I know environmental resources are very important, and I want you to expound as you can on this because I'm trying to teach our community how important environmental relationships are to
Hmm.
our environmental resources are to our development process.
I think environmental relationships are very important. The biggest one I see being is the fact that most people stop learning, developing, and growing at around the age of 23, meaning that if you took a poll, even just say random people around you, and you say, "Hey, I got a question for you. I'm just curious. What's the last 5 books you read?" And see what answers you get. A
Yeah,
lot of people
short
are
list.
no longer reading. They used to say if you want to hide something from someone, put it in a book.
That's right.
So environmental factors in development, man, like I say, the knowledge is endless. If you look at the word knowledge, it's two words combined. It's K-N-O-W, know, and it's ledge, L-E-D-G-E.
Continuous.
Know that there is no ledge. The
Right.
knowledge is infinite.
No
You can
limit.
never get enough of it. You can live to be 1,200 years old and you still wouldn't know everything in the world because
Right.
knowledge is infinite. So
That's
the fact
exactly.
that, knowledge is infinite, we should always be seeking that knowledge. And the only way to seek that knowledge is to read books, honestly. It's just like going to the gym when you physically go to work out. You're physically developing yourself. When you're reading books, you're physically developing yourself. You're enhancing your reading comprehension, you're increasing your intellect, you're allowing yourself to speak more words. The same, you around your constituents. If you're reading books, let's just say you read 5 books for the next 25 years, all the number of books that you've read in those years, and people around you may read 1 or 2 books a year, you have exponentially increased your intellectual capacity just from reading and exercising your mind. So that's what I feel is the biggest environmental factor that I would tell any young man or woman, uh, continue to read, because that's how
And
you're going to
what you
grow who
read is
you are.
important. And what you
Absolutely.
read is important. Read
Yes.
strategically is what I say.
Yep.
I read. Once you set a foundational floor, I would say, for what you read,
Hmm.
and then move forward from there strategically.
Yeah.
Right?
And
You do need to understand not just that right and wrong are good things.
hmm
You need to know. Uh, Let me give you an example. Okay, if I only read the Ten Commandments. Okay, culturally within other cultures, there are several types of lies. Okay, there are several types of dishonesty. There's several types of manipulation. If you don't learn those things, you'll be disappointed
hmm
most of your life, professionally, right? And so it's always good to read existentially, to grow uh, and form your existence. Then you start looking at books that are strategically directed to your vocation, to what you're trying to do, uh, and also to after you develop yourself, read books that allow you to understand social situations,
Yep.
scenarios, what may or may not happen. Because what that does is that tempers your expectations and it makes you more, for the lack of a better term, patient.
hmm
Yeah, and less litigious. So, yeah. Go ahead, Solomon.
Man, I'm just sitting here thinking, Mr. Witten, you talked about getting to know like who you are and all that. I think it's very important because when I first became Mr. Reed's mentee, the very first question he asked me was who are you?
hmm
And I guarantee you that's the hardest because I ask people that question and I just laugh. They have no idea
Yes.
what I'm laughing about because when you ask someone who are you, you start to talk about the things you do for work, what you like to eat, and who you're friends with, and so on and so forth. But we actually don't know who we are.
Yes.
We don't know who we are.
Yeah. That's by design, though. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's I tell people the other thing along with reading is the development of really your character. John Wooden had a saying, don't be concerned about your reputation. That's just what others think of you. Be more concerned about your character because that's who you are.
That's
And
exactly
really,
right.
in developing character, a lot of people think that, character is just you. Nobody else knows about it. But I'd say all the time that, character is personal, but it's not private. It's on display for everybody to see at all
Exactly
times.
right.
So the
Yeah.
moment that you step foot outside of your house, your character is on display. You represent yourself, you represent your family.
That's
You know what I'm saying? You represent who you work for and whatever other organizations that you may be associated with. People are always watching, whether we know it or not.
Yep. Yep.
right. And the thing about it is you'll have enemies of your character too. You'll have enemies of your character. In my life, uh, in any level of success, you're going to have enemies of your character. Some of them will just be haters. Some of them, but I've had some high profile haters.
Hmm.
Some of guys with a lot of zeros behind their name. And I pulled through. I pulled through. And I'm gonna tell you something. It's hard to prove something that ain't there. You know, they call it planting evidence,
Yep.
and they couldn't plant any evidence. That says a lot, man. My teacher said about me when I was 12 years old. She said, "You never have to worry about if Juan gonna get in trouble." And my mother was like, "Why?" You know, of course, parents are always, curious. And the teacher said, "Because you never have to, whatever Juan is doing or gonna do, you already know about it. He's always gonna be upfront about it." So I have a philosophy: tell on yourself in everything you're doing, even in contracts. I was teaching someone the other day that a contract is a person. If you want to know how to write good contracts, you got to know who you're dealing with.
Hmm.
And you can write a contract with somebody that's corrupt, but you got to write the corruption in the contract. You know what I'm saying? So um, it's valuable to know who you are and also know who you're dealing with. That's why I believe that once you have the floor, and that floor is you, once you mitigated you and define who you're gonna be, then you have to understand how you're gonna interact with the world. You can't go naive is no longer a choice. Because if you're naive so long, that's who you're choosing to be,
Hmm.
right? And so when you go out in the world, be prepared for whoever you're dealing with. All right, that's a good one. All right, what keeps you grounded with all your success? What keeps your head out of the clouds?
Uh,
I know LR, so his head's in the clouds every once in a while.
uh, to be honest, I think what helps me is, I try to keep my cup full, but the reason why I do that is to allow myself to help other people. I believe in every interaction that we have, be the person, friend or foe. I believe that we should leave individuals better than we found them. We should always allow ourselves to give that person, something they can leave with, because at the end of the day, people may not always remember what you do for them. They may not always remember what position you put them in, but typically they're going to remember how you treated them.
That's right.
So everybody from the CFO down to the person that's laying the tile, putting screws in drywalls, and I treat those individuals with respect, because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So
That's
it
right.
doesn't cost anything to be nice to people,
No, it doesn't.
and the other thing I believe in is spreading positive energy. I had this saying that I tell people, I said, I believe in the science of peace. Peace is PEACE, but I break that down. The positive energy always creates elevation. And that's what I'm looking to do is elevate every day that I'm out here in the world. I want to not only elevate myself, but elevate those around me.
Solomon knows that there's a big thing that I say, and I've told you this before, LA. I don't deal with men that talk about people. I don't deal with men that gossip. Like at all. That is a horrible trait in men. We're gonna go down deeper in that, but I will tell you one of the reasons I was intrigued with my relationship and wanted to carry it out with LR is because LR don't gossip at all, at all. Like me, if I can't help you, I am not going to talk about you, and if I'm going to talk about you, it's going to be directed in how I can help you move forward. Uh, there is no value in discussing a man or a woman if we're not helping them in some form. That's just what I believe. That's a good answer. Number 7, can you tell us the process and perspective of a project superintendent as it relates to project approach versus a project manager?
Um, I think they're very similar. You know what I mean?
Okay.
The project manager, a lot of times deal with more the financial side of things and kind of the relationship with the owner and the client. From the superintendent standpoint, I would say that there's three big things that we really focus on. The first one being people, because people are what's building these projects out here, men and women. They're the ones getting the projects done. So the people aspect and safety to me go hand in hand, number one. So safety and people is that first one. The next one I would say is quality. We are paid professionals, but at the end of the day, we want to deliver a quality project done right the first time, so we don't have to go back and rework things because nobody's really tracking costs for rework. It's one of the biggest things in construction that takes away a lot of money from the bottom line of these projects is rework and not doing quality. And I think the third thing is production. And when I say production, that's usually number one on most people's list, but it's number three on mine. So I'm people and safety, quality and production, and even so more so production. In terms of looking at production from a actual true production standpoint, the operation science behind it, there is a I say there's a gap, but there's actually a chasm in the construction industry because a lot of people that come from the general building side don't understand production, meaning that there's only a few variables that can even make things move faster and increase your throughput. But you really have to have a manufacturing mindset and look at projects as almost like building widgets. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the name of the game when you talk of production is, how do you control your work in process and how do you increase your throughput and get that cycle time down? So those are the three big things for me: safety and people, number one; quality, number two; and production, three, from a superintendent standpoint.
Okay. That's a good answer. You want to produce a quality product. That's the way you do it. All right. Number 8. How do you resolve the issues in your field, like racial bias and lack of opportunity in your field for Black people?
I think the answer to that question is character. You know what I mean? Who you are. I read something several years ago that talked about when people are hired for employment, typically they're hired based off, what they do, what they've done. They've worked on a $500 million project. They've been a part of this team from a technical expertise wise. That's how most people get hired. When people typically get terminated from employment, it's typically because they have character deficiencies or character flaws. They don't show up for work on time. They may abuse alcohol and other substances. They steal time from the company, things of those natures. So with that being said, character is very important in this industry, and who you are is very important. It's always going to shine through. I mean, if you're a person that says, hey, I don't drink alcohol. Well, it doesn't matter if it's Jesus' birthday, it's your grandmother's birthday, if it's Juan's birthday, you don't drink alcohol because that's just what you're gonna do, you know. Now, if you
You
say,
are
"Hey,
who
I,
you
I
are.
drink,
That's
I
right.
drink on certain occasions," and that's
Yeah.
different. But if you tell somebody, "Hey, I don't drink alcohol," then naturally your character is not going to allow you to drink alcohol.
Yeah.
So character is huge in this industry, because who you are eventually is always going to come through, and it's always going to show up.
So no conjunctions. But and
Yes.
you do what you are. That's exactly
Yep.
right. All right. I've spoken to Solomon many times about the lack of or fear of of socializing among Black coworkers in corporate America.
Hmm.
How does that affect the Black corporation and growth? Now, I'm gonna let me chime in a little bit on that. I was Fluor Daniels' top minority contractor. Okay, I had all the benefits in the world. Dan Dunning, who was probably third in charge in the entire Fluor organization, and at the time it was a $9 billion organization. My mentee, I had three mentees. One was the third in charge of Fluor. The other one was the top executive vice president of project management in the entire company, and the other was the commercial manager in the entire organization and contracts manager. Okay, so I pretty much set up. We used to go to dinner at a restaurant or lunch at a restaurant right behind Fluid Daniel and Sugarland. So we're going to lunch, and uh, that day I was asked a question by one of my mentees. He said, "Juan, why don't Black people work together?" Okay. Now, if I didn't know him like I usually don't answer those questions from other communities. Okay, I don't. But we had a special relationship where I could ask him anything, he could ask me anything. Okay. Uh, I don't have those relationships with other communities very much, but I had it with him. And so I thought about it, and I gave him an answer. I said, Black people don't value one another. Okay. Professionally, personally, they just don't value each other. And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Let me give you an example." I gave him an example. I can't share that on here, but I gave him another formative example corporately. I said, "I know a few black people that work here at Fluor." And he started naming names, but these were higher level people, LR, some, you know what I'm saying? So they know whoever I'm with, I'm good, right? But when we went to lunch that day, I said, watch something. I said, see that black guy walking up with that group right there? I said, he doesn't know me, right? I said, when he comes over here, we're going to stand right here, and he's not going to speak to me unless you speak to one of the white guys you know and introduce us. So we're standing there, and exactly what I said happened. He's like, wow, that's an anomaly. This guy very intelligent. I think he had an IQ higher than Bill Gates' IQ. I mean, very smart. So I said, I'm going to give you another example. I said, see that group over there? He said, yeah, that's Spinks over there. Spinks was a big-time executive in Florida, too. He said, let's go over there and say hey to him. We went over there and say hey to him, blah, blah. And everybody spoke to me, but the black guy just standing there waiting to be introduced to me in order to greet me. And look, we essentially went around the restaurant that entire time before we ate doing the same thing, right? Black people are afraid to approach other black people in organizations because they don't want to be seen as knowing somebody that might not be skillful enough, might not be connected enough, might not be notarized enough. And I always thought that was ridiculous because I have not met many black people that have worked in corporate America that weren't proficient in what they did.
Hmm.
Because you have to realize there's so much scrutiny around you. I say it's like this, and this is just the real world. When you go out in the real world as a black person, I don't understand how you commit crimes because people are always watching you. I mean, I'm fascinated with black guys that commit crimes because, how y'all get away with it? I mean, I can't move without being watched, right? And so I find this fascinating, and I don't have an answer. So I told Solomon, you might.
uh, I think it goes back to an earlier question, Juan. Knowledge of oneself. Without knowing who you truly are and where you came from, it's hard to operate and elevate yourself. The biggest thing, like I say, is reading. Everything that you've ever wanted to know or you ever want to find, you can find out from reading some text. Now, there's a lot of things that can be hidden from people, but most of those things are still written down in books. I was in Dallas one time, and I was at a cigar bar over in Addison, and
Mm,
I
I know
ran
where you
into
were, a
a
little small cigar place.
yeah, as a gentleman. He was from Ethiopia, born and raised, and he was in there, and we were talking about several things, and he had mentioned something to me, and I was mentioning something about the philosophers, and he says, hey, what do you know about the philosophers? I said, I read about the philosophers in a book called "We Are the Black Jews," and if you think about it, most people that follow the Jewish religion, 98.9% of those people will tell you that they're Jewish. They won't say that they're Jews because they know that the original Jews were the philosophers, Ethiopians. They were black. So even something as simple as that, knowing the difference between Jews and Jewish, the normal person wouldn't know. But I was having this conversation with this Ethiopian man. He was like, "Man, I'm impressed that you even know that." So like I said, a lot of things are they're out there in plain sight. But if you don't have knowledge of oneself and you're not educating yourself, then it's hard to know from whence we came.
So you saying know who you are?
You have to know who you are. You have to know where we come from. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's three guys and we all look alike on the screen, African American, which I don't believe that's a term. African is a continent made up of 52 countries. So which country am I from if you're going to define me as African American? So I usually tell people that I'm indigenous, I'm from the land. And they
Yeah.
say, what do you mean? I say, man, we are really the original. We have no birth record, the beginning and the end. And at the end of the day, the melanated man is the only person on the face of the earth that can create any race. It's scientifically proven. So if you realize that and you realize the power in just that genetic DNA makeup, man, it transforms your mind when you really start to think about it. Because at that point, you're just tapping into it and you realize that anything that you believe and you put your mind to is possible.
Yes, yes, I agree. Solomon?
I think it goes back to, we've talked about it several times, the whole manifest destiny thing, where we know that we don't belong in majority of these places. Like the example you gave, Mr. Reed, where another black person is waiting for somebody else to introduce you to them. So we know that we don't belong. So we just get in and we just sit quiet and wait for, to be like, hey, come on, let's go, and then we follow through. But we I think we can tell that we don't really belong. So we just play along with the games and all that to get to the places we want to get to. And then when you get home, it's like you take that off and it's like, okay, cool. Now I can be myself. I can
Hmm.
go back to being who I actually am when all these people can't watch me through my walls. So
Yep.
I guess
I,
that's why I never fit in because I was always me.
I would even piggyback off what Solomon said. If someone is uh, basically demonstrating the behavior that Solomon was described there, they don't really know who they are. Because if they did, you can be yourself wherever you go. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Whether it's, here in the United States, if it's in Europe, if it's at work, if
absolutely.
it's at home, I am who I am. And you don't have to, camouflage yourself and assimilate. Now, I do believe that you can kind of, you just step back and take in the environment that you're in. But at the end of the day, it goes back to character. Who you are is always going to come out one way or the other. So it's
Here's
really
what
no
I have
point
to
in
say.
trying to hide it.
Here's what I have to say in appreciating both perspectives. I have to say that uh, there is a combative energy that exists, and that combative energy exists based on acceptance, right?
Hmm.
And, and I don't believe that we can convince everybody at the same time of who they are.
No.
Because, first of all, you have to understand, I hate to say preach a sermon, but a long time ago, I made a comment about money's not real. Money's not real. Relationships are.
Hmm.
And then I laid out how other communities, through relationships, create access to money.
Yep.
Okay? It's not about, it's me trusting you based on your skill set and your reputation. No matter how black we are, no matter how whatever color we are, we have to trust each other based on our reputation. So some ask, why don't I listen to scrutiny? Why don't I listen to gossip? I don't listen to either one of them because neither are real. Okay? Who a person really is, not just on their resume, because you can have a group of friends that lie for you on a resume. But who they really are, I say this all the time. God doesn't believe what you say, He believes what you do.
Hmm.
Because what you do is who you really are. And so I use that rhythm in my life. And how do I know it works? Both of you know that I'm probably one of the most inexclusive, unserene people you ever meet. I don't need you to see my success. I don't. I've already done it, and all I need to do is put it over here. And any other success I move forward in, that's going to be quiet success, right? If we do business, it's going to be quiet business. Now, it may be renowned or resounding outwardly. We may build a 80-story building, but they'll never know I was involved. I don't have that necessity of ego anymore. That's one of the reasons I've been able to be successful is because I've stepped out of the limelight. One of my biggest partners that helped us create our original company, Hallmark. One of the problems with him is he wanted to walk out front. That lasted all of 6 months, LR Solomon, and then we did this. Went under. Because a person that seeks the limelight doesn't have the obligation to knowledge that a person that doesn't has.
Hmm.
So I allowed him to do that and let him step up. But We do have a thing that exists that we can't ignore, uh, LR. Specifically in the community, we've learned that. And that's why we have people on you, and that's why we have things that we're not just talking about, building hotels and hospitals, because we need people to know who they have to be in order to succeed in what we're doing. You have to be what you want to become. You have to already exist in it, and you have to move in it. You can't just say it. And one of the biggest things I heard look, this is a true statement, but it's a wasteful statement without action. You can say all day, I am a big time developer in the world. But if you never actuate it, never move in it, it's never going to happen. Because you don't believe it and God don't believe it. And whatever you
Hmm.
don't believe, God don't believe it. All right, let's go to the next question. Um, okay, this is the next question. Apply, kind of go with what we just talked about. How do we build a black culture strategically within corporate organizations as Hispanics and whites have? That's a good
Strategic
one.
building. That's a great one. To be honest, it is I'm not going to say it's a massive undertaking, but it takes people. You mentioned the word earlier, trust. Trust is really the foundation of a lot of things. So if individuals don't trust you, it's going to be hard to build that foundation and that culture inside of any
But
organization.
what about this, LR? What if individuals don't trust themselves?
And that's even worse. That lends itself back to not having knowledge of oneself if you don't trust yourself, you know. So in order for really the way I look at it, in order for you to trust somebody, you have to feel that there's something in it for you. A lot of people have I used to call it WIFM, the radio station. What's in it for me? You know, because you have to almost be able to approach it from a coaching standpoint and allow people to feel empowered in order to gain that trust, because you can't go into anything automatically and expect to have trust from individuals that you've never
True.
worked
That's true.
with. You
That's
know,
true.
so in order to do that, they used to have this thing called the golden rule, you know, treat people like you want to be treated, but you have to take it a step further and almost bump it up to the platinum rule and treat people how they want to be treated. And in doing so, you really need to get to know those individuals, outside of work, their family, their faith, their educational background, what makes those individuals tick. And then it's something you got to do daily, though. It's going around, you're having little conversations with these individuals, you're building that rapport. Eventually, those people are going to come around and they're going to trust you and they're going to start doing things.
I gotta throw a conjunction in there, brother.
Yes.
Let me say this. And again, this is going to be a difficult question for you, but that's why I got you on here. I know you. Uh, Black people go to church together all the time.
They do.
Black people work. We have entire universities, uh, and I know. God, let's talk about Prairie View. And last
Hmm.
time you were down here, you visited Prairie View. I remember. Um,
Yep.
there's a brother at Prairie View that works for the Key to Engineering. A guy that used to be my mentor one day owns that company. A long time ago owns that company, and he works there. And there are no blacks working under them.
Yep.
I mean, so they obviously know the capability. They're there. They're educating themselves. You know, um, but it all boils down to for them is they're trying to isolate dollars, but they still believe that money matters in that relationship. If you never build those relationships, you'll never truly have any. Forget the word money. You'll never really have any authority.
Hmm.
You know, I didn't have any authority until I got money. I didn't. I could do the work. People knew my name. But when you have money, you don't care. You're like, I don't care if I don't get the next job. I don't. So then you're able to speak up in meetings where most people just, I got to get the next job to keep my business going,
Yep.
right? And I think with that type of supporting one another, uh, because a Mexican will hire a Mexican like that. They won't even look at anybody else, and nobody says anything. A white guy hire a white guy like that. But if a black person hires somebody black, they have to explain why. You know, that's and where you and I agree right now. I've told Solomon the same thing. That's not white people's problem or fault.
No.
That's not Mexican people's fault or problem. That's not the Indian group, since we're in development. That's not their fault. That's our fault. That's our fault. Because we're so afraid of what's going to be said, even if nothing's going to be said, that we, don't hire our own. And it starts with the residuals. You're talking about trust, LR. I'll never trust you to build a house if I've never seen you build a doghouse.
Hmm.
I'll never trust you to build a sublet if I've never seen you build a house, a four-story. I mean, a four-bedroom house. I'll never let you build a gas station if you never built a sublet. But if I never give you that opportunity, then guess
Yes.
what?
You never trust
That's right. That's right. That's right. All right, brother. I'm not gonna ring you on that one because you know I can. I'm going.
them.
All right. Number 11. What is the mindset of a successful black person in any vocation? Be real. What's the mindset of success
Oh
for a black
man,
person? Just look at yourself.
that's an
How
interesting
do you
question.
approach?
Oh, I think I approach it from the I guess, to me, the further you move up in the industry, you move into really from transactional relationships to more relational relationships. The more you get into relational relationships, the more who you are comes into play.
That's right.
And so for me, character development is huge. Like we talked about several times during this conversation, who you are eventually is going to come out.
That's right.
So if you haven't developed who you are and your character, then when you move from transactional to relational, that's really when it's going to show up.
I like
So
that.
in the early formative years, you have to intentionally grow who you are. It's not that you could go to like, I'm gonna go take a leadership course, I'm gonna go take a class. It's something that has to be done daily with intention. The guy who wrote Atomic Habits, James Clear, he talked about the cover of the book is deceiving because everybody thinks it's about habits, but it's actually about deliberate practice and the set point at which you set yourself to get into doing those deliberate practice. Because let's be real, man, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
That's exactly right.
So in order to do that, you have to deliberately do things daily, even when you don't want to do them, in order to get to that level where you want to go when you start going from more transactional to relationship,
Gotta
relational
put the time
things.
in. That's right.
Yep.
I like that. That's a good answer. I can tell you thought about that one. Has anyone in corporate America who've really been giving you a leg up? And why is it that blacks don't even open doors for others in corporate America?
So to answer the
I
first
know
part
I
of that
got a lot of
question,
legs up. A lot of legs up.
um,
A lot of
I
legs up.
I will say that the majority of it is I think people genuinely see, for me specifically, who I am as an individual, who my character is. But the second part of that question, as far as to why people, I wouldn't even say it's just black people in general, but why black people don't want to give other people that look like us those opportunities. They seem to be afraid that someone's going to take the job. But for me personally, I'm actually looking for somebody to take my job so I can elevate myself to the next level. I'm looking to train and groom individuals to be ready to step into that role. That shows not only that I'm can do the technical side of it, but I can also groom, grow, and develop people. And that's really what it's about is growing people. In order to be successful, you got to have a team around you. And
That's right.
honestly, I would rather be the one that knows the least amount in the room than the one that knows the most around the room. Because if I know the most in that room, then I need to find a new room to be in.
There you do. That's
So
right.
that's what I believe a lot of individuals are afraid of. They want to sit on that level to be, I know everything. And I tell people, I'm not afraid to be wrong. In fact, I want to be wrong. Whether right or wrong, that's not the thing. The biggest thing is, can we get it right together as a team?
I like
Let's
that.
get the process right. Whether I'm right or wrong, yeah, I'm wrong. I can admit to being wrong, but how do we move forward and get it right together?
Get the egos out the room.
Yes.
Get the egos out the room. Number 13. Uh, have you done any research about the development in Africa, and how do you believe the rise in Africa changes the perspective of blacks globally? How will people
Um,
see us globally as Africa rises?
to be honest, I have not done any research
Okay.
on the developments in Africa. Now, I do know that, many centuries ago, you say mid to late 1800s, that several European places had colonies in Africa. I mean, if you look at the Liberian flag and how similar it is to the United States flag, Liberia was a colony of the United States. It was one of those places where free slaves had an opportunity to go to Liberia and live, work there. They were kind of a separate class from Native Africans there. But the fact that Africa, at the end of the day, is really the place that is the most plentiful in resources, always has been, always will be. Um, I don't know that people are going to look at us necessarily differently because a lot of people separate us from Native Africans, but there is a multitude of resources there.
What do you think, Solomon?
I I want to say that I agree with what Mr. Whitney just said, and the only reason why I say that is because at this particular point, black people we're not even united. We look at us. We look at the group from different aspects. Like African Americans look at the Africans differently. The Africans look at the African Americans differently. The Jamaicans look at the Africans differently. So it's like we can't expect other people to look at us and go, "Oh wow, okay, cool, Africa, black people, this is going on." If we don't look at ourselves that way.
Mm.
Hmm.
I will say, in taking both of you guys' perspective into consideration, uh, I have a unique understanding of European psyche, right? And European psyche always goes to commercialism. Always. All they concern themselves with is you call it capitalism, but it's really commercialism. Um, they are unique to this. Everything I do is based on some historic understanding. And you look at the world in real time. There is a global perspective of Caucasian people. They understand it and they know it. Okay, you can go from Spain. I go often to Russia. And even though the Russian perspective is a bit different, there's a reason the Russian perspective is a bit different. But Great Britain, I don't care where you go, white is collectively respected. Okay? And why? Because they are tied to everything, some way, shape, form, and fashion. As Africa grows, and Africa is going to grow uh, faster than the Chinese, that the Republic of China has, because um, the necessity for Africa. Africa is the last bastion past going into outer space. Okay, it is a place that I don't know if you guys watch television today, but before I came downstairs, uh, Russia, Russia, who else? Who else? Russia, I think it was, no, Russia, India, and what are they? And China are walking through the square in China like we did in Washington with all the tanks. Now, if you understand what that means, look, we like what you saying, Trump, all that BS and Ukraine and this and the other. But this our world now. Now, I don't know how much you guys travel, but I travel a lot. And in the world, nobody cares about the United States. Like literally. We're still looking at us like we are. We haven't been a superpower. Let me get in 50 years. I'll be 54 next month. and we haven't been a superpower in years. When you go to China, and Solomon, you've heard me say this about Singapore. Singapore makes New York look like Beaumont, Texas. Everything is there. And you go online and look at it, they're talking about the importance of Singapore. Why? Because it's a bridge. And so is Dubai. They're being called the go-betweens for the world. So even though our country is still talking this crap, collectively, Caucasian people know once the United States falls, all whiteness falls. So what are they fighting over, LR? They're fighting over just having relationships without the dollar. That's all they're, and they don't want to fight. Russia and all these other countries just want to work together without America pushing everybody around. So they essentially said that. And this is the last controlling interest that the Roman Empire has over the world. So that being said, Africa, the way that they're moving is going to grow faster than any culture that's ever existed. When that happens, I'm going to make it simple as this, LR. When that happens, this is what's going to happen. All the brothers that are working in the big companies, and I can tell you it happened to me, when I was working for a company, Fluor came to me because they wanted relationships in Mozambique. Well, Juan, don't you have some relationship with these? They start looking around at black people. And that'll change the perspective of how they see black people all over the world. They don't know how to get away from themselves. I don't care what type of European you deal with in the world. They all have the same perspective. In my mind, I don't care where I was. When I was the boss in a company, I was literally the manager of our entire corporation in Louisiana. And if I didn't treat the certain white boy right, I had problems with the president. That's just how they move, right? And it's only because they have authority based on their collective. So they're no longer going to have to assume that we're together anymore, LR. They'll know we're together based on the authority of our brothers, because if they don't get along with what's going on in Africa, forget about war, you don't have access to the world. And can America live alone? No. That sounds good to where I live. I live in a place that's nothing but Caucasians, right? There's probably 2 or 3 black people around here, and they way off. They think Trump winning says a lot. All it really speaks to is their desperation. So in the world, I see Africa taking over everything in 5 years. Everything. And not taking over like we think to. See, we have this perspective of war and no. We're talking about economic freedom where Dubai is already building, and I told Solomon this too, they're already building resorts in Botswana. They're already set to invest $20 billion in a resort. What they do, right? That's what they do. They build resorts. They're building refineries there. All of BlackRock's investments, all of Carlyle's investments are directed where? In Africa right now. Okay? They're fighting over the coasts, because I'm building a project in Guyana. They're fighting over the coast of Guyana right now. Why are the oil and gas companies doing that? Because they can't control Africa anymore. 2 months ago, the largest refiner in Africa couldn't even develop oil in his own country. Now, he can do it. See, they're already lining up. You can't look at what's going on in front of your face. You got to understand globally what's going on. And globally, I see Africa being perceived with a different respect, specifically from the 2 superpowers, Russia and China. So I see that as an opportunity for us, not only to collectively, because you don't know this, LR, but we've already started working with Africa as the community REIT. But also, uh, they have to look at us differently because that's why we treat them differently. We know what they're going to act a fool. If they hit Turner tried to kick me out of construction business. Turner's the largest construction company in the world, commercial construction company in the world. The same guy, Glowacki, who is the president right now in Houston, he's the same guy that tried to get me kicked out of the construction business because one of his guys, well, basically I cut him off in a project, right? Well, for 5 years, they did it. And then I got myself together. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for white perspectives. So everywhere I went, they would say the same thing. Well, they could never say I stole anything or I messed up a project. They would just say, that's all they have to say about us, that's a bad guy. Because they knew I wasn't going to lay down. And essentially, you already know this, LR, I sued Turner for my money. That's all I did. What anybody else would have done. You owe me $4 million, I want my money. Every company in Houston, they went around and told them, don't work with them. So what happened then? Then Negroes started agreeing with it. Well, we can't work with him. And then rumors started that wasn't even true. It is always the relationship in a community that makes a community strong. Black people don't have that. I don't care what we try to say, we don't have that. I've gotten to the point where I don't like to say that I don't work with my black brothers. I do. I'm doing it right now. But I'm strategic in who I work with, and they have to be somebody that I've built trust with over a long period of time. And it has to be somebody that's not subject to rumor. Nobody can come tell me anything about LR. Nobody can come tell me anything about Solomon. Let me find out on my own by sitting down and talking with her. But you're not just going to come tell me something and believe. LR, if I'm lying, I'm flying. You know this is a fact. Somebody can come tell somebody that's our complexion about another somebody that's our complexion, and they just going to go with it. That can't fly in the real world if we're going to collectively be strong as a black economy. So, I've gone on and I've talked too long. I appreciate you coming on, brother. We have enough information that we're going to be able to break down a lot of stuff, man. I knew I was going to get a good conversation from you. I knew I was going to get a direct conversation from you. I knew I was going to get the ability to tap your brain in relation to your love of your relationship with God and about your relationship with God. I knew that I was going to get a task that others can come on and they can understand what. And I guess the last question I want to ask you is to give us a better and clearer understanding of what's being a construction superintendent is in relation to a developer. That's the last question I'm going to ask
I would say, as far as it relates to a developer, the construction superintendent is probably one of the more important pieces of that puzzle. Really, the superintendent, like we said earlier, is kind of the chief execution officer. It's all about execution at the end of the day. So you don't physically do any of the work, but you have what we call the knowledge piece of it. You're able to tap people's brains and tap people's expertise and see how all those things coincide and work together. And now, if you really understand construction and you really understand production, you're able to even tap into the AI world and make the mundane skills that took you 2, 3 hours. You can do those now in a few minutes, and it allows you to even go out and learn more about really what's happening on the projects and how to control the direction of these projects so we can make them successful for the developers. And the biggest thing I see that you can do now is you can, like I said, if you can combine the technical piece, the knowledge piece, and then kind of this whole AI world, is you can take people's investment capital and allow them to get more return on investment capital with the same amount of money.
Mm,
So there's some things out there that we can probably discuss more in depth on that's happening right now that maybe a lot of people are not even aware of.
I
So
love it. I love it. Well, thanks a lot for coming on, Brother LR. I will see you soon, and I will be in contact. Thank you for sharing with us all your knowledge, brother. We really appreciate it.
thank you for having me on. Respect.
Have a good evening.
All right, brother.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen.